I call this assignment Beyond the Frame, Diptychs, Triptychs, and Mosaic Photographs. Traditional photographers so often limit themselves to one image. Sometimes they work in series or even sequences, but it's one image at a time. It's looking at one image, comparing that to the next, and that to the next, etc. There's other ways to look at photography, and this really is a limitation of the single image. The single image is a limitation. What I'm asking you to do with one of your assignments is to create a pair of diptychs or triptychs, or at least one larger, more involved mosaic photograph. I'm going to give you some examples. First, let me define these things. A diptych is any object with two flat plates, which are a pair. Traditionally, they're attached with a hinge. They were often used as religious altarpieces. Same thing with triptych works. A work that's divided into three sections or three panels. Again, it can be hinged together, so it can be folded open or shut. A mosaic in modern times has come to mean any pattern or image made from multiple pieces. I'm going to show you examples of all of these. Barbara Bosworth is a Massachusetts-based photographer. She uses a series of singular images to create a panoramic view. She's doing this with a large format view camera, making one image to the left, moving her camera head just a little bit, making the middle image, and then moving it to the right, changing focus for each one, as you see. But essentially, she's taking a single frame and extending that. So still working within the traditions of photography, but extending that to multiple images rather than a single image to encompass or incorporate the entire thought. This triptych is interesting in how she plays with the idea of focus from one image to the next, from left to right. David Stephenson is an American-born photographer who's been living in Tasmania, Australia since the 1980s. He also works in diptychs and triptychs and creating panoramas. These are night views. They're photographed with film with extended exposures, often several minutes, if not a few of them hours in length. He calls these light cities, and in a way they record the electrical usage of some of these metropolitan areas. Photographing at night with available light sometimes gives an ethereal quality to the colors in these images. Judging by the length of the moon trail in the center section of this panorama, I'm guessing this exposure was probably 10 minutes per panel, maybe a little bit longer. Teryn Simon is a New York artist. I'm going to leave this up for just a minute so that you can come back and read the whole thing. I'm going to give you a very quick view of Simon's work. Her imagery is really quite detailed and requires a more detailed, lengthy reading to really get the full extent of the messages that she's trying to get across. One of the things that she's doing in this series, A Living Man Declared Dead, and other chapters, is she's photographing entire families, all living members of a family, and you can see that in the panel here, and they're not the world's greatest slides I've ever made. And these are about, each photograph here, about 4 by 5 inches in size, but she photographs all living members of the family. She sometimes leaves blanks, as she does here, because they're members of the family that have gone missing. The family doesn't really know what's happened to them. There's a variety of circumstances. In addition to those, the use of multiple frames here to create this larger portrait of a family, she usually uses multiple panels. So this kind of text would go along sometimes and provide captions for these pictures. Sometimes it's simply a list of the family members. And then some of the information in this panel gets further developed in a further panel. So you kind of read these left to right, but some of this information gets further developed where she uses photographs as evidence or as details to give us some idea about the family history and the portrait in that sense. Sometimes families have tragedies, and the panels goes into those events, and sometimes political events as well. I wanted to give you a sense of the scale of these so you can see them installed in a museum setting. And I think you can get the sense here it's that the repetition, the immensity of the project is more important than any of the single parts. Again, a detail. But her pattern is to photograph the family on the left, include a panel with information in the center, more or less, and then photographic information that further develops some of the family stories on the right-hand side. Again, I would suggest going back to that earlier panel and reading the whole thing. But I think you get a sense of her work. And here I included some of the text, so you get a little sense of what some of that says, going along with some of the pictures that you see here. So the family histories tell a personal as well as a story about societies, cultures, and countries. A little more lighthearted is the photography of Chicago-based artist Ken Josephson. In the 1960s and 1970s, Josephson was making a series of photographs where he held things out in front of his camera lens. In this case, he held a series of postcards out and kind of playfully played with the image in the background as it related to the postcard that he held in hand. His work has always played with the idea of reality and illusion of photography, as he includes photographs within photographs, as you see here or here. And they're done in a playful, almost lighthearted manner. I think it's okay to chuckle at Ken Josephson photographs. They play with the idea of art, and frankly, photography is art. British artist David Hockney, who also works in America, is better known as a painter than he is as a photographer, although his photographs are nearly as spectacular as his painted works. Let me direct you first to the size of this image, 77 by 112 inches. It's impressive in scale, and what you can kind of see, and again, not a great slide here, but what you can kind of see is this is made up of a mosaic of images. These were shot originally with film, and he sent the film out to be processed, and when you did that, you usually got a 4x6 print back with all of your negatives. In this case, he took those 4x6-inch prints and layered and pasted them on top of one another over and over and over. So he made many negatives in this one scene and then recollaged them together, gluing them onto a flat surface. And you'll see that a little bit in the examples as we go. Here he's taking the same idea, but using Polaroids These are likely a 670 Polaroid, which is a square, about 4 by 4 inch image. So what you would see here, each square would be 4 by 4 inches. So you can kind of figure out that the size of these, by using the panoramic image in a way that truncates and separates the space, he's almost using space like a cubist painter would, and hence his mimicking of the material someone like Pablo Picasso or Juan Gris or George Braque may have included in the subject matter in their cubist paintings. The still life with fruits and vegetables and the guitar and the vase with flowers. So it's a playful look at art history as well. Again, 4 by 6 inch prints layered and glued on top of one another to create the mosaic that you see here on a large scale piece of mapboard. And another one of his Polaroid composites. So again, each square about 4 by 4 inches, and his kind of cubist take on space. Brian Taylor is a Bay Area photographer, recently retired from San Jose State University. Taylor's done a lot of alternative processes in his career. This is a series of photographs, essentially of book pages. So he's making these page by page comparisons. So sometimes, like what you see here, is he's cut or torn away one page to reveal the page below it. And the titles in his works are important, generally metaphoric. Looks like hand-colored black and white imagery, as you see here as well. And again, you see that layering technique, almost like out of a diary, somebody's torn out pages, and what we're left with, almost like skip reading, somewhere a man's shoes are wet. There's humor in Brian's work as well.